Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today. I'm Holly. I'm from Apricity. We're a digital-first fertility clinic, and I'm joined today by Seetal and Gajinder. So welcome, everyone. We'll just wait a few moments for anyone else to join. No, it's lunchtime, so people are probably grabbing their sandwiches and trying to find a quiet moment. Just yeah. Okay. I think we'll get started. 12:32. So, as I said, welcome everyone. I'm Holly. I'm joined today by Seetal Savla. You can find her Savla Fair on Instagram. She's a writer and fertility advocate. Seetal is a Berlin-based freelance writer, and she's a fertility patient advocate, having experienced multiple failed IVFs and losses before becoming mum to a daughter. She is very passionate about sharing her story to support others on a similar journey and reduce the stigma around fertility issues, particularly in South Asian communities. And we're also, so welcome, Seetal. Thank you so much for giving us time.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, we're really, really grateful to have you on here. And we're also joined by Gajinder, who is also at Apricity with me, and Gajinder's an egg donation specialist and fertility advisor. I would say, Gajinder, your main role is helping people become parents through egg donation by finding them, an egg donor.
Yeah.
Donor that most closely matches what somebody's looking for. And Gajinder's passionate about combining cutting-edge technology with genuine care and support. And I hear you on the phone a lot. I know that's exactly what you do. You bring so much experience and compassion every day. So welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
What we'll do is we've got a couple of slides, so I will share those. And first we'll hear from Gajinder. We'll just go through a little bit about what we do at Apricity and what our service entails and how, how this has come about. And then we'll move on, and we're looking forward to hearing from Seetal on her own experience. And I think we'll have lots of time for questions at the end, or maybe so feel free to put them in the Q&A or in the chat. We had a couple that came through on registration, so we'll also share those. And I'm really looking forward to hearing more from both of you. So I'm just going to share my screen. This is the bit where I can no longer find the tab. Where is it? I had it a minute ago, didn't I?
You did.
Oh dear. Okay, 1
There
moment.
was some sort of issue, I find, with these things, right? And sometimes it's things that you don't anticipate. But like we were saying before we joined, I had an earlier call and I just couldn't get the video to work.
There we go.
Always the way.
Yeah, there's always something.
It's right, because we're recording this, and so then when we send it out, we'll cut this bit out of the video. We're just looking desperately for the
The share button underneath, Holly. Can you see it with an arrow? Yeah.
Oh dear. There, got it. Can you see my screen?
Can't see the
Can't see
slideshow
anything just yet. No.
Lovely photo of you there, Seetal. So a little bit around donor egg IVF and using an egg donor. I think it would be a good place for you to pick up, Gajinder, and explain your role and what you do at Apricity. I think we can probably make an assumption that people joining the call are very familiar with IVF itself, and if you're on this call, you probably are quite far into your journey. So really, we're here to talk specifically about donor conception. So yeah, we'd love to hear from you about your role and what you do and how you support recipients with finding a donor.
Yes. Holly, just to let you know, we can't see the slide yet.
Wow. Screen sharing is paused, honestly. What is... Is it working now?
It is working now. Perfect. Thank you. So yes, as Holly kindly introduced me, I am Gajinder. So I'm the egg donation specialist and fertility advisor at Apricity. I have a very special job, a very important job that I absolutely love, and I undertake a lot of the matching. So I do the matching of our donors to our recipients and to our intended parents. So we offer a virtual matching service. It works a lot better for people that have busier lifestyles, virtual lifestyles. As we know, especially since COVID times, people prefer the hybrid lifestyle. It's nice to see people on the screen, just like yourself, Seetal. You're in Berlin at the moment, but we would never have been able to make this happen if it wasn't for the virtual side of things. So it works really well for people to kind of communicate with us virtually. Our donors that we onboard, we don't bring them in from any other egg banks or agencies. They are all recruited by our team. In fact, I also onboard our donors. So we speak to them ourselves, we recruit them ourselves, we advertise egg donation ourselves. The donors must be based and residing in the UK. So we can't bring in donors from other countries just because of the anonymity around egg donation in the UK. Obviously, at this stage, the donation is anonymous, but from the age of 18, any child born as a result of donation is able to find out all identifying information about their donor. And that's what's really, really important. In the UK, it's all regulated by the HFEA, so they capture all information about all donors, all donor-conceived children in the UK. So it's very well regulated. Our donors, with the matching, it's a lot more of a bespoke match service rather than just, let's find a match just based on ethnic background, hair color, eye color, and height, which is obviously what we look at. It's the 4 key main characteristics, but we do a lot more of an in-depth and personal match. So we look at things such as hobbies and interests. We look at, and this is one of the things that I absolutely love. So we have pictures of the recipient and pictures of the donor, and I visually, with my eyes, I try and find a match that really resembles and looks like the recipient, if that's something they want us to do. Okay, so obviously for some people it's really important. For some people, there's particular ethnic backgrounds that can take slightly longer to match based on. They might say, actually, I'm happy to consider a different ethnic background, and that we just have to make sure that person looks a lot like me, which is exactly what we do. So with kind of the profiling, we send over 2 pictures of the donor as well as a baby and a toddler, which is really special. Obviously, the recipient can have a look and see if the donor looks similar to themselves when they're a similar sort of age. If they've already got children of their own, at that stage, they can compare the pictures accordingly. It just helps them envision what their donor looks like and gives them a bit more of an idea of the donor. They also get a personal profile. So this is a really beautiful message written by the donor. So the donor includes information about why they are donating, why are they doing this? What are their motivations behind donating? Because in the UK, it is an altruistic act. They don't get paid for it. They get compensated up to £985, but we don't call it a payment. We have beautiful, beautiful women that come forwards, and some women are donating because they simply just want to help someone else have a child. Some women have completed their families and they say, right, completed my families, again, really want to help someone else. Some people are really kind of aware of the lack of particular ethnic backgrounds. They're becoming a lot more kind of, I guess, not seeing it so much as a taboo subject within their cultures, and again, just wanting to help their communities and wanting to kind of be an advocate and donate, which is amazing. It's incredible. So you get kind of this profile about the donor, which gives you an insight of kind of their hobbies, their interests, educational achievements. You get their age, their BMI. We have to ensure there's no identifying information on that document, but that document can be accessed from a child born as a result of donation from the age of 18. So they're able to access that. With the care that we offer, so as I said, we're virtual. So we have an app we would set the donor up on, and our recipients, our intended parents, and they would be able to liaise with our medical team, so our doctors, our consultants, and with myself. That's kind of as a whole what we do and our matching side of things. In terms of the donors, so what they have to do before they even get matched to a recipient or intended parent. So the first thing they do is, obviously, we have to ensure they're between the age of 18 and 35, and they must have a BMI of under 35 in order to be considered initially. They then complete some questionnaires, and that's to give us information about their medical history, and their family medical history. It's quite an extensive list. Obviously, we've got a duty of care towards this donor and any child born as a result of her donation. So we have to be really careful that there's nothing that could be kind of passed on to any child. So that is all reviewed. If they're given the all clear and we're happy for them to proceed, they then have to do an AMH test, so an anti-Müllerian hormone test, which would give us an indication of their egg reserve. The criteria is it must come back between 12 and 45 in order for them to be considered. If that's okay, they then move forward and have an antral-follicle count scan, which is a scan to check their follicles. If we're happy with that, they then have to have a mandatory counselling session. So the counselling session is to discuss kind of the implications, the legalities around donation. Sometimes we request for several counselling sessions for the donor if we feel kind of they need a bit more support. It's to include kind of the timeframes involved, you know, we go through the anonymity side of things. But that's kind of the onboarding, what they have to do. And then once you have been matched to a donor, so this is for fresh donors, the donors complete a series of bloods which are on the screen to ensure that we can then go ahead and match them and continue. Our frozen egg donors, because we do offer fresh and frozen, would have already completed these series of tests already. Yeah, so that's a small introduction as to, you know, what we do, what I do, how we onboard our donors.
Thanks, Gajinder. I think I probably should put this slide before. This just talks a little bit more
Yeah.
about it's received, which you covered, and I think this is what we get so much feedback on, that patients find so valuable, the personal story of the donor. It makes such a difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's really beautiful. We get so emotional as well whenever I'm reading the profiles. I'm always so emotional. I love reading the profiles. It's just something a little bit more special, a bit more extra rather than just seeing characteristics. You know, you really get to kind of form a bit of a bond with that donor as well, through this written profile. So it's really special.
And do we provide that for both fresh and frozen egg packages then?
Exactly. So both fresh and frozen donors are onboarded the same way. They are matched the same way as well.
Mm-hmm. So with our frozen egg packages, although it's, you know, you call them frozen egg packages rather than an egg bank, because we still offer the same bespoke matching process. However,
exactly.
in terms of flexibility and availability, it can be more suitable for quite a lot of people because they don't have to wait. You know, those eggs have been quarantined and they're ready to go, aren't they?
Exactly. So with the frozen eggs, exactly as you said, they've been quarantined, they're readily available, they're of mature quality, but we're still giving a match time, and the average match times, I'll just touch on this quickly with our match times. So we give a match time of 3 to 6 months for a Caucasian donor. So that's white British, white Irish, white European donors. 3 to 6 months for our Black African donors. We had a really amazing influx of Black African donors, which is great. Any other ethnic backgrounds, so that's for Asian donors, Indian donors, Black Caribbean donors as well. We give roughly a 6 to 12 month match time. It can happen a lot quicker, but we're giving these match times to manage expectations and be realistic because we're offering a bespoke service. Okay, so with our frozen eggs, obviously we may be able to match someone instantly, but we give a bit of a match time with frozen eggs as well, just because of that matching.
It really depends on the criteria that somebody and how specific you want to be.
Exactly.
Beyond even just ethnicity as well. So if there are certain
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that I understand. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And just to say, what we'll do is when we send around the recording, we send a follow-up email. You know, it is completely free and no obligation to have a call with Gajinder. So, you know, if anyone would like to talk more in depth with Gajinder about our donors, what ethnicity we currently have available, or just questions, or just generally to find out more, you know, we're here to have a chat. Gajinder, you know, would love to talk through the process and explain more about how she could help, whether you
Absolutely
or not. But that brings me on quite nicely to Seetal's story. And thank you so much for, you know, getting in touch with us. I think this came about because you actually, you know Becky from Defining Mum quite well. We've done a lot of webinars and we collaborate with on her platform Path to Parent Hub, and we ended up connecting through Becky. I think it was a webinar that we held, and you were very keen to help raise awareness and share your story, and that's just such a wonderful thing to have people want to step forward and share, because I think it helps others feel less alone, and that and you know, someone else has felt this way, or someone else has walked this path before me, and there's a way forward. So we're really grateful to you for joining. So I'm going to hand over to you now. Would you like to, where to
start?
Start with this.
Yeah, because all in all, it's about a 6-year journey, really. So I'll take you right back to the beginning. 2015, it was Christmas Day when my husband Neil and I found out that I had conceived naturally. And at this point, it's worth noting that I had been married for 8 years, and that was our sole pregnancy to date. And we hadn't been trying to conceive. And a quick explanation for that is the pressure to procreate from family, from the wider community. As soon as you get married, many South Asians will know that's it. Like, when is the baby arriving? You know, for the first couple of years or so, there's a lot of pressure, maybe even longer in some cases. And it did drop off a bit for me, but it really did push me in the other direction. I think there was a lot of resentment about me, about the expectations of a married woman. And I didn't want to simply, don't know how to phrase this, actually. I sort of resented all of that. And so I rebelled, basically. And I thought then, I did want to become a mum, and I sort of lost sight of that, I think, a little bit. And when I got that positive test, I had always expected to be a bit scared about losing my independence and my identity. And I didn't feel any of that in the moment. I was just overjoyed. And I sort of snowballed. I projected myself into the future and thought, okay, 9 months' time, we could have a boy or a girl, and here are some names, and life is going to change. And it was my husband who just said, okay, let's slow down a little bit. Let's have it the pregnancy confirmed and see how things go. Unfortunately, a few weeks later, I had an early loss, so about 5 or 6 weeks into the pregnancy. And while physically I was okay, emotionally, it really impacted me, because I had been given a glimpse of something that I didn't think I wanted, realized that I did want it, and afterwards it was just cruelly ripped away from me. And so it sort of set alarm bells ringing, because it'd been 8 years, and we decided to go to the GP to get some tests done. And that lasted for about a year, after which I got a diagnosis of low ovarian reserve. I was in my mid-30s at this point. We were referred to do IVF straight away, and that was on the NHS. Unfortunately, that cycle was unsuccessful. And because I didn't create any extra embryos to freeze, we didn't qualify for a second round of funding, and we had to go private. So in 2017, we found a clinic in London and went ahead with that. We did 2 rounds there, and it's known colloquially as IVF boot camp. It's a very intense place where you're going in every day for blood tests. You have scans every other day. There's a lot of medication, and I was very overwhelmed by all the medical jargon, all the emotions. Both of those rounds were unsuccessful, and after that 3rd round, our then consultant suggested donor eggs. And in the moment, I didn't feel any shock or grief or any disappointment, or I wasn't devastated, because I was just so fed up of trying and failing to conceive that I was told I would have a higher chance of success using a donor. And I thought, well, I'm willing to try that. And I just want to become a mum. I would be able to carry the child, so I would have a connection that way. We hadn't considered surrogacy or adoption at that point. My husband, however, wasn't quite ready. And we then changed clinics to go with somewhere that offered both donor egg IVF and also own egg IVF. We did a final 4th round. And then COVID happened, everything got locked down. And that was really frustrating, because we just, as anyone who's going through IVF knows, you're in limbo anyway. You're just waiting and waiting and waiting for something. And then the clinic got in touch, said that they were closing, and we didn't know for how long. You know, if they'd said 2 months, 6 months, at least you have something to work towards. You have a timeline, and you can manage yourself a bit and plan accordingly. But that was just the worst time. In the end, it was only a couple of months. We were lucky that they reopened quickly, but again, we had a failed cycle. And we took some time out and decided that donor conception would be the best way to go for us. And then we had many things to think about. Did we want to go abroad? Did we want to have an anonymous or non-anonymous donor? Should we try and look for one from a South Asian background? We were told the estimated waiting time would be 2 to 3 years at that point. So both of us were approaching our late 30s, and we didn't really have a lot of time to play with. So yeah, given against the backdrop of COVID, all the uncertainty, we didn't want to travel. There are costs involved with that. We wanted to stay in the UK, in London. That was the plan. And then towards the end of 2020, we decided to up sticks and move to Berlin. We had a work opportunity through my husband's job. And, things weren't really working out with IVF. And, we thought we need to just give it a break and maybe we can pick it up a bit later on, have a new start. And so, yeah, after a few months, we started conversations again with our clinic. They found a donor. And we had decided, we can talk about this in more detail, but at a high level, we found a British Spanish donor. So we had decided to go with this clinic because they had access to large egg banks in Spain and Portugal. And non-anonymous donation was important to us because we wanted to be able to give our future child the option to find out about their biological parent if they should so wish. And that cycle started. We were full of hope. And then we got some bad news. Our consultant told us that all 15 eggs that had been collected were unviable. And this hadn't even crossed my mind. It was a surprise. That was a real shock, actually, because you don't tend to hear about this side of things. You hear a lot of success stories, which are incredibly important to give hope. But I hadn't even thought about this. So I hadn't prepared myself for this eventuality. And at that point, I started to have a lot of doubts. Should we have gone with anonymous donation? Should we have maybe gone abroad? It would have been faster. Maybe I would have been pregnant by now. Life would have moved on. And that donor she wasn't ready to donate again because she had just found a new job. So we had to wait a few months. Luckily, the clinic found us another donor. This was a British Ecuadorian one who was actually matched with somebody else, but for personal reasons, that didn't go through. And she was offered to us. It was a great match and we went ahead. And I went back to the UK in spring 2021, had the transfer again with COVID. Everything was quite difficult because there was a lot of paperwork to be filled in. I had to go by myself. So this was adding a lot of stress onto an already stressful situation. But I got pregnant. And so that was amazing. Just so happy that things were working out at long last. But of course, being quite cautious because we'd had a lot of failures under our belt at that point. Sadly, I did lose that pregnancy around the 2-month mark. And that was a very, very difficult experience being away from home. I didn't speak much German at the time. And, you have a lot of hope and your hearts are broken all over again. Nothing can really prepare you for that bad news, and at that point we still had a couple of embryos in the freezer back in London, but we just took some time out to take stock of things. Did we want to go ahead? Could we put ourselves through another round? What would that entail, etc. And I think I was starting to accept that maybe we wouldn't be having a family this way. I didn't know if I could go back to it all. And, maybe it was time to embrace the life that we had in London. In Berlin, it was a new start. And then I conceived naturally. And that was the biggest shock of all, actually. I didn't expect anything. I honestly didn't expect that pregnancy to go to term after all of that. Why would it? We hadn't had that experience so far. So, yeah, pregnancy after a loss, we could do a whole webinar on that as well. It's very difficult to manage the fears and anxieties around that. But everything worked out. It was a textbook pregnancy after all the struggles that we'd faced so far. And our daughter arrived in summer 2022. So yeah, that's already been 2.5 years now. So yeah, it's... now I'm on the other side of things. It's a whole different experience, but I like to share my story, as we said at the beginning, to help other people. I had a lot of support at the beginning when I felt really overwhelmed by everything, just by finding the TTC community, trying to conceive community on Instagram, and reading other people's stories, listening to podcasts. And there weren't many South Asian people speaking out about their experiences at that point. But the ones who did really gave me hope and support. And just being able to talk to them helped as well, because your family and friends want to be there for you if you're open with them. But it's very different when you talk to someone who's walked a similar path. So I really hope that by sharing all of this, the ups and the downs, it's comforting to people, and also informative for those who wish to support people they know going through this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Seetal, for sharing that. What a journey. Gosh, I mean,
Yeah.
so many different avenues that you tried before October 2021. I was going to ask you, how did you navigate that? Like, what was your mindset like? Like, how did you navigate those ups and downs and those challenges?
At the beginning, I think I was just on autopilot, especially with the first couple of rounds of IVF. I was in shock. I didn't expect to be there. And the medical jargon was overwhelming. It was all very daunting. And I think I just sort of turned up where I was told to be, did what I had to do, and didn't think about it too much. I was really just in denial. And slowly, through engaging with other accounts and speaking to people, attending events, reading books, all of that helped me to feel a bit more in control, a bit more empowered. And I also had some therapy as well, which I know is not accessible to everybody. That was to cope with my miscarriage, and also the failed trauma, that can build up after all the IVFs as well. And yeah, it really did help me to talk to someone. She was actually a South Asian therapist. I've had a few therapists before, but I felt ready to speak to someone who understood the cultural layers that are involved when going through a journey like this, and the nuances. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that sort of comes onto some of these common fears, concerns that I'm sure resonate with you and how you were feeling, and will be resonating with people watching. And
yeah, I think for us, if I can just, I'll go through them. The main thing is, do you want to tell people about it? And for both myself and my husband, we've been open with our families from the outset. Donor conception wasn't a taboo in my family, because one of my cousins actually pursued this path to conceive her son. And so we've always been quite open about that, but I know that's not the case for many families. So is that something that you wish to confide in your family about, and how? That can be quite a difficult conversation to have. For us, I remember sitting around the kitchen table telling my in-laws, we've tried so many rounds, you've seen it hasn't worked, unfortunately. And this is the advice we were given. It was an option. We've considered everything, and we're going ahead with donor conception. And they said, they didn't fully understand everything, but they were there to support us. Same for my parents as well. And it makes so much difference. But I know that that's not the case for everybody. So that is definitely one of the fears, how to tell my family. Should I tell them? What will they think as well? There's a lot of fear of judgment, criticism, maybe even being ostracized from the community, being made to feel like a failure as well. I think we heap a lot of that pressure on ourselves. I certainly felt like a failure as a woman and a wife, a daughter, in all of the roles, daughter-in-law as well. And that it doesn't help at all. Makes you just feel so much worse, and clouds judgment a lot, I think, leaving you feeling quite alone. So if the wider community do find out, what conversations will they be having about you? Will that reflect badly on you and your family? Definitely something that factors into the decision-making process. And whether you do or do not wish to tell anyone, do you want a South Asian donor? In our case, myself, my husband, we're both of South Asian origin. And I didn't actually want one, because for me, I had a fear of seeing my child, if we were lucky enough to have a child through donor conception, an Indian child, knowing that another Indian woman was able to do something that I couldn't. And I felt that that would just remind me of my perceived inadequacy. The reality may have been different. Once the child is born, I do hear accounts of, there's a fear of, will I love them, will I bond as well? And not that you sort of forget, but you're wrapped up in love for your child. And if you think about all the children that you love that aren't biologically yours, your cousins and, your nephews and nieces, etc., your friends' children, it is possible to feel that intense love and not have a biological link. I also feared the child rejecting me, maybe not as a baby, but later on in life when they were older. Would it be embarrassing because we speak so openly about it? I do, online, etc., and with family and friends. And would they think that that's just private, that's their information to share? And how would I tell my child as well? My husband and I decided we would, but would we do that by introducing books in a natural way? Would we show cartoons or take them to events, or how would you do that? And that was part of my husband's reluctance as well. He sort of, pursuing this path would mean that you would have to explain both to your child and to other people, whereas if you're able to conceive naturally, obviously it's not really an issue. And it's not how you imagine becoming a parent. So there's a lot to think about. And of course, when you think about it, and then the reality can often be, two different things as well. And the consideration of anonymous versus non-anonymous, for us, as I said in the introduction as well, we wanted to be able to give identifying information to our child if they wished. But that's not the case if you don't want to be open about it with family and anybody else, which is perfectly valid as well. Everyone has their reasons, and it's a very personal choice.
Yeah, I think so many of these feelings and fears and concerns are felt, throughout the community, where everybody feels them, and then it's sort of nuanced by your own individual situations. And I know that the Path to Parenthood platform that Becky, she aims to really support people through all of these different areas. And one of the things that we do at Apricity is we do offer everyone 6 months access to that during the period of finding a donor and starting treatment, just for that additional layer of support, as well as counselling. And there's anything that really helps you feel like there's a support network around you, whether it's virtual or online, or
Actually, yeah, looking through these points again, one of the things that surprised me, so I mentioned I didn't really feel grief in the moment when I was told that we may need to consider using donor eggs. And when we were matched with the Spanish and the Ecuadorian donors, I thought the phenotyping, the characteristics would be similar enough, and I would be carrying the child, so I would be involved. What I didn't think about was what the baby would look like and how that would feel, and people's comments. So it's when I had my daughter, I didn't realize just how many times people would comment on who she looked like. And at the beginning, there were a lot of comments about how she looked like my husband. And naturally, each person's family will say, oh, the baby reminds me of you when you were younger. And I found that to be really irritating, to be honest, because I sort of felt sidelined, and she is my biological child. And then I thought, if she had been a donor conceived child, that would have really, really hurt me. And we've been open about it. People would know. And no one ever says anything, I believe, with malicious intent, but it would just pinch at me each time that I heard, oh, she looks like, Neil when he was a baby. And that surprised me because it hadn't really crossed my mind so much beforehand.
there's
I
such a
actually sorry, I was just going to jump in and just say about someone recently, actually one of our recipients, obviously won't name anyone, and we're going to like further detail, but she she's from South Asian community, and you know, had to go through the donor egg option, and I had matched her to a donor who wasn't of the same ethnic background, but a donor who looked exactly like her, very, very similar to her. I had a conversation with her the other day, and she said, everyone is telling me the baby looks like me, and due to personal reasons, they weren't disclosing to family members because of the wider community, and they just would never understand, she said. But she said, you know, it's everyone's telling me he looks exactly like me, that the baby looks exactly like me. She was like, there's no better feeling. She was like, obviously it's only myself and my husband that know that we've used donor eggs as part of this our journey, but he, you know, the baby looks exactly like me, and everyone is telling me that. And I was just like, that's amazing.
That's lovely.
It's so lovely to hear that. It's so nice. It's so refreshing.
Mm.
So yeah, on kind of just I was just thinking that kind of on the flip side with even with kind of donor egg and matching, and obviously because we try and match based on what the recipient looks like as well, as much as we can. It was just so nice to hear that she felt so fulfilled that the comments people were making, which she knew they would make, which was kind of her main worries, were you know, positive comments for her. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, it's really nice to hear that side of things.
yeah,
I think there's a bias as well. People will always look a similarity. I think about some people I know, and they think that the baby looks like their grandfather as a
yeah,
baby. Something like, do you know, I feel that
It's only natural to make these sorts of comments, but
yeah.
yeah, I was really sensitive to that postpartum.
I can
For sure.
imagine, yeah.
but
I just kept putting myself in that mindset of, you know, if she had been donor conceived, how painful that would be. I think each
Yeah.
time it would just sort of, like a little drop of water, just build up so much.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, this brings us on to this next slide, which is probably the next part of your story, Seetal. I don't know if you want to
Yeah.
hear as well, about
But
what
once,
you did mention,
yeah, of course.
embryos that were still in the freezer. What did
Mhm.
you decide after you'd had your daughter?
Once she was born, and once we got through that tricky fourth trimester and we found our feet as new parents, we got an email from our clinic, you know, the yearly reminder that we still had embryos in storage. And the options at that point were to leave them in storage and pay for another year, to go ahead with IVF, to donate to science, to the clinic, if they had any ongoing research projects, that is, or to donate to another couple. And we could have just paid for another year of storage and kind of pushed that decision later down the line, which we had done before, but we had to make a decision. And we took some time, quite a few months, to decide, you know, did we want to do IVF again? It would be in the UK with a child this time. So the upheaval for all of us as a family. And then how would it be if we were successful to have a biological child and a donor conceived child? How would that work? And I know other people, other advocates who do talk about this as well. So it didn't feel like I was walking into completely uncharted territory, but it is very different when you're making the decision for yourself. And because it was Neil's genetic material, not mine as well, I was a bit more removed from it. So I was sort of happy to take a back seat and let him decide, but also be part of the equation too. I was leaning towards donation. And I thought he would want to donate to a clinic, actually. But he then decided that he wanted to donate to another couple to give somebody else a chance to conceive, like someone had given us a chance. And even though it hadn't worked out, we still had a shot, no pun intended. And I was really surprised, you know. It was a beautiful thing to do, actually. And we were really excited about it. We told the clinic, and the donor had consented originally, so we went ahead with all the paperwork. And then later we found out that she withdrew her consent for personal reasons, which was really sad. I was hoping that, yeah, we would have a hand in maybe creating a family for somebody. And we would have known if a baby had been born from that donation, but even though it's Neil's genetic material, as we covered earlier, you don't have any legal right. But we both liked the idea of just a half sibling in the world. We're not sure if we will try to expand our family anymore. having been through quite a lot. And yeah, that was nice that maybe in an ideal world they might reconnect and sort of share some history. You never know how things will pan out. But yeah, so then our next option was to donate to the clinic, and I'm glad we were able to do that. It's not always possible if there aren't any research projects ongoing, or if the clinic, I mean, you'll be able to shed a bit more light on this, but I think that's not always an option. And actually, there was another option to let the embryos go as well, which after all the time, the money, the effort you put into it, all that science, all that love and hope, to sign off on them being discarded is really difficult. And it did cross my mind, could I put myself through some more IVF? I didn't want them to go to waste as such, but yeah, at that time it wasn't the right decision for us. So we decided to donate. I did actually write a piece about this for the Times, but unfortunately it's behind a paywall, so we can share that in the email when we share this recording, but some people may be able to access it, and it goes into a bit more detail about all of this as well.
I'll make sure we include that. I think that's what an amazing thing to feel that you could do. I think that you hear that so often from the TTC community and the donor conception community about really wanting to pay it forward. And
yeah, I did. But yeah, I sort of skipped over the points about, if we were unsuccessful, how would we cope with another failed round or miscarriage, because it did take us quite a long time, many months, to emotionally and in my case physically recover from the miscarriage as well. And then if we were successful, how would we cope in Berlin, because we don't have any childcare beyond daycare, beyond nursery. And that would be very difficult. We're now approaching our mid-40s actually, so energy levels are impacted. It's yeah, having a toddler at this age is definitely very challenging. Keeps you on your toes for sure.
yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Present and exhausted.
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. But yeah, I guess this is the aspect of donor conception that may not get discussed as much. We often focus on, and quite rightly so, on the grief around losing your genetics, and especially with South Asians as well, how to tell people, whether to tell people. Yeah.
No, thank you for sharing that. So you were able to donate them to the clinic, so
Yeah.
that was for research purposes then.
Yes.
Which is amazing. That brings us really to the Q&A section. I'm going to just check if anyone have come in as well. Stop sharing. There we go. We had a couple of questions coming in and beforehand when people were registering, and if anyone has any other questions, feel free to pop them on the Q&A here. A particular one we had was around the feelings, like managing other people's feelings. Someone had said, about my mother-in-law has really strong feelings about IVF anyway. I'm really worried about how to tell her, and my husband doesn't think that we should. Is that something that you encountered at all, or something that you and your husband had to navigate together?
Not so much. We didn't have any opposition, any resistance, any criticisms. My mother-in-law was actually one of 10, and so it's quite a big family, and each sibling has at least 2 children, some of whom have undergone IVF as well to have their children. And it's pretty widely discussed in the family. I mean, it's not a topic at every mealtime, but it's not a taboo. And so for us, it's a very different approach. But I have read and heard other accounts where it's just not possible to talk to family about things. And I completely understand, because it takes a lot of energy as well. If you know that you won't be met with understanding, it's difficult to take that on, to try and accept that. It may make you doubt your decisions as well, actually. So in this case, I think if I had to face a similar situation, I would probably I would probably keep it quiet as well, and just to deal with my own emotions and everything, and keep the lines of communication open with my partner, just to make sure that we're not sort of isolating ourselves, and suppressing any emotions. I think going back to the beginning of my IVF journey, it was so overwhelming for me that my husband sort of was my rock, and he really pushed everything aside that he was feeling. All the confusion as well. He felt that he had to be strong, and a South Asian male as well. We don't tend to, or they don't talk about their emotions so much. And it's only when I started to feel a bit more in control, a bit more familiar with the process, that he was then able to open up, and lean on me, which is a difficult situation to be in, I think.
Yeah, it's it can put a lot of strain on any, even like the most solid of relationships.
For sure.
So finding time and space to communicate and be there for each other is definitely, hard, I think, for many people. But
yeah, I would say you don't have to tell anybody. It's your choice. Ultimately, it's so long as you and your partner are on the same page, that's ultimately what counts. If there's a disconnect there, then that's a bit trickier than whether to tell parents or not.
Yeah. We've had a question here, two that have come in. One says we want to use an anonymous donor. Given the age, why did you decide against? So someone's saying we want to use an anonymous donor.
Yeah.
And age, I guess that's given your age. Why did you decide against?
In general, just anonymous donation, we felt it wasn't for us because we wanted to give identifying information about the donor to our child, at least present that option, because we've been so open about it as well. We thought it was important to give them that choice about their genetic history, and ethnicity. And it's different for everybody. If you do anonymous donation abroad, it is often faster and cheaper. Nowadays, there are genealogy websites and things. You can find a lot of information out. But at the time that we made that decision, that's what felt right for us.
I think that's probably something to consider. And I think, Gajinder, you have that conversation as well when having conversations. Obviously, everyone's decision is respected, but it's important to remember that with 23andMe or
yeah,
the likelihood of it being anonymous, truly anonymous forever is riskier.
Yeah, it's so accessible now, all these websites and ancestry and hereditary websites.
Yeah, I think that was one of the questions that came through about whether, wasn't it the child, if they wanted to find out about the donor beforehand. Legally in the UK, as you touched on before, they don't have access to that information until they're 18.
Yeah.
But with websites, they may be able to find something out.
All the non-identifying information is given at 16, and then all the identifying is from 18. So yeah.
And that's name and last known address, I believe, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Another question that's come in from somebody says, I've been advised that if I wanted to go down the donor egg route, then I should do this abroad because the success rates are higher when using a fresh donor, which can't be done in the UK. Is this correct? It's probably a question for you, Gajinder. Someone has been advised to go abroad because it's better success for fresh donor eggs, which we can't do in the UK. Which, I mean, that's what we do.
No, I wouldn't say that's correct. No, we definitely do offer a fresh donor egg service. We have an amazing success rate. We've got an 88% cumulative pregnancy rate, which is amazing. It's really high. There's I do know, and I have heard that in other countries and abroad they kind of guarantee embryos, which is something we don't do in the UK. It's not kind of openly done in the UK just because you can't ever guarantee embryos. We guarantee numbers of eggs, which we're very confident on, especially with frozen eggs. We can definitely guarantee how many you receive. And obviously with all the vetting of the donors that is done, we're very confident we can guarantee egg numbers. But I wouldn't say that statement's correct. We can definitely match based on, fresh egg donors with good statistics and good results.
And just to touch on that about the success rates for fresh versus frozen, this is something our Chief Medical Officer, Tim, spoken about recently is that actually with advances in technology today around vitrification and egg thawing, the success rates between using fresh eggs and frozen eggs are negligible.
Yeah.
It is just the outcomes for a live birth are the same when using fresh or frozen eggs.
Exactly.
So obviously, the more eggs you have, the more likely you are to create more embryos. However, when going through a fresh egg donation cycle, and Gurjinder, jump in if I do not get this fully accurate, but the understanding is that not all of the eggs will necessarily be mature. So even though when you have a fresh egg donation cycle, there are maybe more eggs collected, they will not all be mature. Whereas if you use frozen eggs, all of the eggs that are frozen will be mature and have been quarantined. So the number of eggs that you would lose from that are not mature is corresponds to the number of eggs that might be lost in the thawing process.
Yes, about 80 to 90%.
Yeah. So if a donor had, say, 16 eggs collected, probably 80 to 90% of those would be mature. And if there was a certain number of frozen eggs when they're thawed, about 80 to 90% will survive the thawing process. So
exactly,
it would end up with the same amount. And actually, once you get past the thawing process, the outcomes are the same. So we can, again, I can include some links to that in the follow-up email and some of the information that we've covered with our Chief Medical Officer, who speaks extensively on this topic. So we'll share those. But yeah, I think we had, there was another question that had come in. Where somebody says, I feel really selfish for wanting to go through this, you know, and putting myself through it, you know, above all costs. I'm putting my partner and family through it. Did you feel that at all at any point, Seetal? Is that something that resonates with you?
I can't say that was my personal experience, no. I think I was probably more willing to explore further options than my husband, because we'd had that failed IVF, and I really did want to become a mum. As did he. He wanted to become a parent, but it does take its toll. And I think we were lucky in that we were still able to communicate with one another, and we had our ups and downs, of course. But I know that, as we touched on earlier, going through a TTC journey, it can push couples apart as well. There's a lot of a strain. I think we sort of just had some timelines. We had rough timelines about how much we would do and could do before we wanted to then try and accept that, you know, we'd made a good attempt of it and would reach the end of the road. I think which is where we were actually until we conceived naturally, which is a difficult decision to make. There are many, many options, but they're not all accessible. They're not all suitable. For example, I think surrogacy would have been quite challenging for me to get my head around. For others, it's the best solution. Adoption as well, when you're going through fertility struggles, people will say, why don't you just adopt? You know, there are so many children in the world, etc., or just do IVF. And there is no just about anything. There's no at least, because everything requires a lot of consideration. It's all very emotional. And life is still going on in the background. You still have work concerns, family, etc. You know, you don't want to press pause on things too much and look back and feel like you've missed out on living life.
I'm sure that would resonate with many people currently going through this journey or about to embark on it. That's probably all we've got. Time conscious, we've only got a few more minutes left, and one of the things I wanted to ask was, are there particular communities or groups that people can find, specifically South Asian donor conception communities, or is there anywhere that you could recommend or signpost?
In terms of forums and groups, I think Gurjinder might be able to help a bit more with that. I personally didn't find that was so helpful for me. I followed people on Instagram. So one of the advocates that I really love is Dr. Shima Tariq, and her handle is one _in_7, all written out. And she speaks about her experience of using a donor and pregnancy after loss and having one biological and non-biological child. And there are several advocates like that now sharing experiences of donor conception. Krina Diman as well. She underwent donor conception. She also used 2 different surrogates following a cancer diagnosis, losing her fertility that way. So those are 2 great South Asian advocates. Unfortunately, I don't know of any men speaking about that, which is a shame. That's definitely an area where we could use more voices, which would be great. But it is challenging. There are men speaking about loss and IVF, being childless, not by choice. But I don't think I've come across any, donor conception. Correct me if.
No, I haven't either, if I'm honest with you. Not male handles, no.
No, but you mentioned Becky's platform, Paths to Parent Hub, and it's wonderful to see that expand so much because there are webinars on how to tell friends and family different ways to approach that because it's not a one size fits all. And then conversations with donor conceived children, recipient parents. So from different angles, I think it's really very helpful. And live events now that you can actually have them, it's not all online. And you can get to listen to other patient stories, professionals as well from a psychological point of view. So I definitely recommend that. And then I also did a video diary series in collaboration with a pharmaceutical brand. And that's a 13-part series documenting my pregnancy using a donor and, back and forth between London and Berlin. And the subsequent loss, but I talk about my decision. There's an episode where I go into more detail about everything I covered here as well, why we decided to go ahead with a donor, a Spanish one, and then an Ecuadorian one, etc. And then also the Times piece that I mentioned as well about the donation. Yeah.
Fantastic. Will you share the link for
Yes.
can we watch the video series? Is that on YouTube?
Yeah. It's all on my Instagram feed actually, on the reels. Yeah, there's 13 episodes and they're generally about 8 to 10 minutes. There is a Q&A with my husband. People submitted questions about his perspective and that's a little bit longer, but I think that might be helpful to people going through this.
Absolutely. We'll share that. We'll make sure that we follow up.
Yeah. And of course, if anybody wants to chat to me as well, because I know sometimes asking questions in this kind of forum isn't very easy or things come to you a bit later on. So my DMs are always open. And my Instagram handle is @SavlaFair. So just my surname and then FAIRE from my food blogging days, which was a long time ago now. So it's probably time to change my handle, I think.
I did wonder. What
Yeah, it was a play on savoir faire because I studied French at university as well. So it's a little bit niche, but I liked it at the time.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Seetal. I'm really grateful to you for giving up your lunch hour today and sharing your story. Honestly, I think it's been really, really amazing to hear the journey that you've been on. And I'm so happy that you got your daughter at the end.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. And I hope it's been informative and reassuring, and it's given hope to people on this journey as well, just seeing someone who's been through it. And even though things didn't quite pan out for us with this route, it's, I still think I'm a big champion because, it can definitely work and I've seen it work and it can give you that family that you dream of.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Gajinder.
Thank
you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Seetal.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank
Thank you.
you.